2 notes on that video. It says pro-Hamas rally. That was from social media. I don't know that they were there under the banner of a pro-Hamas rally. They were there as a pro-Palestine rally, and you couldn't see with the graphic, but they were chanting, however, we don't want no 2 states, we want all of it, which of course would mean the eradication of the Jewish state, which brings up our topic for this next question. What constitutes free speech and what constitutes hate speech? Online conservative influencers and pundits attacked former South Carolina governor and current presidential candidate Nikki Haley over her proposal for what they call a crackdown on free speech regarding Israel. Amid the current Israel-Hamas war, the Republican presidential candidate ramped up rhetoric against anti-Semitism by showing her support for the nation of Israel and vowing to protect Jews in the United States. On Wednesday, she fired off a tweet pledging to change the federal definition of anti-Semitism to include denying Israel's right to exist. Here's a quote: "You can't fight anti-Semitism if you can't define it. Joe Biden and the left refused to call anti-Zionism anti-Semitism," she claimed. "As president, I will change the official federal definition of anti-Semitism to include denying Israel's right to exist. And I will pull schools' tax exemption status if they do not combat anti-Semitism in all its forms in accordance with federal law." Haley added, "College campuses are allowed to have free speech, but they are not free to spread hate that supports terrorism. Federal law requires schools to combat anti-Semitism. We will give this law teeth and we will enforce it. The United States of America will not use taxpayer dollars to fund anti-Semitism, period. The October 7 massacre and the ensuing weeks have proven what many of us have long known. There is no difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism." Intercept co-founder Glenn Greenwald and journalist Lee Fang argued Haley's proposal not only infringes upon free speech, especially on college campuses, but broadens the censorship powers of the government. Fang tweeting, "Lol, Nikki Haley is taking Ibram Kendi's ideal to make all racism illegal via a government commission that determines who is racist and who is not, but applying it to criticism of Israel as an ethno-state, which she categorically claims is anti-Semitism." Greenwald tweeting, "Absolutely pathetic that frauds like this one spent years parading as free speech warriors, mocking college students who urge protection from views they find threatening, only to now exploit this war that is not even an American war. Shocked face emoji to seize broad censorship powers." I'm very curious to hear your guys' opinions on this. I am somebody who certainly does not like to censor free speech whenever it is possible, but also I certainly do not think we need to tolerate hate speech as a society. And Zionism is simply Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, the only on planet Earth. And so to me, that would be anti-Semitic speech and hate speech to say otherwise. But I'm curious, I'd love to go first to Mondale for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think this conversation is a nuanced conversation. First of all, I'm glad you said that this is that was not a pro-Hamas rally. I do think there's some naivete to people in the protest screaming about we don't want 2, we just want 1. I think there's some naivete in it, but I also think in its basis, I hear you about the history. The movement since the 19th century has been about this idea that's right, this protection of a state and a place for Israel to exist. I think though, that it's in its origin and its name is not what people are protesting right now. Zionism or Zionist, I think what people are saying right now is this idea that Israel has an ungirded right to control all of that space or as much as it needs without considering what's happening on the other side, Palestinian. So I think we have to be able to have this nuanced conversation where we're saying you cannot be against Israeli people having the right to live free, but you also cannot say that right allows for the eliminating or eradicating of Palestinians and also resources, including land, that is where they stay and exist. So I think that conversation does not exist in people chanting on a college campus about eliminating Israeli people altogether, but it also cannot exist in a space where we say anti-Zionist as we see it in pop culture, or as it's discussed in pop culture, is equated to anti-Semitism. I would say this about Nikki Haley. She is very rich from her, whose family actually was able to exist in America when they first got here, not because of Western culture, but because of Black people. Her father was employed not by a white college, but by HBCU in South Carolina, where most of the enslaved people that came into this country came through the port of Charleston. And yet and still, she still, when she was running for governor, said that she believed the Confederates deserved their own month because Black people had theirs. So for her to sit here and talk about this, and she's not really willing to juggle the fact that Confederates to us, to Black people, are anti-Blackness, and she supports that, says a lot about her, and it makes it seem very political, and it doesn't leave anything for her to stand on other than a cloud at 30,000 feet.
I think that does certainly point out the political hypocrisy, but I think you're making the argument that she should not have done, that she should not have supported the Confederacy's right, but that sort of seemed to me to be making an argument for what she is now proposing. I would love to hear your thoughts, Jordan.
Again, it's a complicated conversation, like Mondale is saying, and I think there are many Jews who would also push back on just the framing of Zionism and people who are anti-Zionist. There are many anti-Zionist Jewish organizations, Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, who I think have been doing tremendous work over the past couple weeks with vigils for victims of Hamas's attack on October 7th, and also people who have been killed in Gaza over the past 3 weeks, centering the humanity of both. And throughout their advocacy and activism have talked about how people have different understandings of both, the term Zionism, what it means to be anti-Zionist, what a peaceful future looks like. And I think we need to consider all of these different, even just definitions and understandings of that. Michelle Goldberg has a really good column in the New York Times from a couple of years ago when people were coming after Rashida Tlaib for criticisms that she had levied against the Israeli government. That you've seen this type of stuff weaponized against people like Ilhan Omar, who talked about the power of AIPAC lobbying. And, we can't criticize one of the most influential political organizations in the country without weaponizing these accusations. It's just a very unhealthy situation to be in when you're talking about money and politics. And the last point I want to make is Nikki Haley is not somebody I would ever want to be determining what can and can't be said. I don't want the government in general to be determining what can and can't be said. There are societal punishments for various things. We've seen people lose their jobs. We've seen people be ostracized for being openly racist, being openly anti-Semitic, and it's definitely on the rise. And you would hope that there are societal consequences for them. But I think as we start to get into terms of government definitions of speech, that's when things start to get perilous. It gets very, very tricky. And I also don't feel comfortable with a conservative Supreme Court determining this, especially this current court, determining anything regarding anyone's civil liberties or constitutional rights. That's an incredibly tightrope to walk.
I hear you on that point, for sure, and you definitely have to question the motives of the people that are arguing for these things. I guess just as a Jewish person, as an Israeli American, I just am really having a hard time when I'm very clearly feeling people getting in my DMs saying, sounds like you're a Zionist, and clearly that being a veil for them not being comfortable yet saying, oh, you're a Jew? Is that what it is? And not to mention the emails I'm getting in my inbox simply for saying that Israel has a right to defend itself, let alone exist. And people saying, oh, I hope your family is killed and raped and you get cancer and die. And at the very least, and saying I have no humanity when I repeatedly speak about the humanity that I care for on both sides and decry Palestinian death, but also decry Jewish death. And people don't see it that way. I think you have to then go to the definition of terms because it erases the Jewish people and makes the Israeli people not something that can exist when you say the concept of Zionism is a bad concept when the definition of it, look, the Oxford Dictionary definition is a movement for originally the reestablishment and now the development and protection of a Jewish nation in what is now Israel. It was established as a political organization in 1897 under Theodor Herzl, was later led by Chaim Weizmann. That's what it is. It's the movement for self-determination for the Jewish people, and that's it. The numbers of Jewish people have been shrinking in countries all around the Middle East, insane and at insane numbers, and we're simply, I think, trying to find some sort of protection where there aren't the misuse of words, the misuse of terms that take their definition and use it as a way to blanketly say Israel doesn't get to exist. I mean, we can bring up a chart quickly. You can see how many Jews used to be in these Arab countries. In 1948, look at the numbers, 140,000 in Algeria, 265,000 in Morocco, Iraq 135,000, total of 851,000. Now 2018, less than 50 Jews in Algeria, less than 2,150 in Morocco, in Iraq, less than 10, a total of 3,300 Jews, yet people are throwing around absurd terms towards the Israeli state of genocide against people who against a terrorist organization that attacked them, while still doing their best to warn in advance and say to the citizens that please try to escape this, please try to flee, we need to take out terrorists and we don't want to kill innocent people. And I just see these terms being weaponized, and that also is a problem that we have to stop.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.